Joining us live from Boston, I'm joined now by our regular Wednesday panel, Josh Frydenberg, Liberal MP in Melbourne, Labor MP Ed Husic in the Sky News Centre. Josh, you've had a bit of experience in this when working as a government advisor, the counter-terrorism focus, well, for a decade or more, has worked very effectively in the intelligence community, working very effectively in the United States, but this one did slip their radar, didn't it?
It did, Kieran, and while it's too early to tell who are the exact perpetrators here, it could be a far-right group, it could be more organised terrorism from abroad, we just don't know. It is going to force a reassessment of the security arrangements around major public events, including sporting events. And it also, in Australia, is going to require us to redouble our efforts, I think, in this environment, because just a few months ago the government released a national security strategy which explicitly said the decade of 9/11 was over and that the greatest threats would come from state actors opposed to non-state actors. Personally, I feel that the threat from non-state actors is still very great, and you can see the level of disruption and the level of harm that they can create. So we just need to ensure that all our agencies, whether in Australia it's the ASIO and the Australian Federal Police and other law enforcement agencies, are just working together to minimise the threat to civilians.
It's obviously very early days, Josh, and hard to ascertain from so far away just what went on or who is responsible. But I know some analysts are looking at the fact that the bomb, the crude nature of it, the fact that there's been no one claim responsibility, that this would indicate a lone wolf. What do you make of that discussion, and is it too early to make any definitive statement either way?
Well, in terms of it being an organised terrorist attempt from abroad involving Al-Qaeda, normally the intelligence agencies do hear a bit of chatter on the international networks, whether it's radio or elsewhere, or on the phones and the like, and that indicates that something big may happen. Apparently there was no such chatter this time round, which is unusual, and we do know that there have been some extreme groups and some lone wolves, as you say, in the United States that have caused huge damage. I mean, we do remember the Oklahoma bombings, which killed, I think, over 100 people. So it's just too early to tell. I wouldn't want to jump to conclusions either way, and I think President Obama has issued a word of warning in that respect, that we just have to get the evidence together, Kieran, before we come to any final conclusions.
Ed Husic, you heard what Josh had to say when it comes to the need for a change of mindset, not just internationally but at home when it comes to major sporting events and such. What do you make of this debate in the wake of the Boston bombings?
Well, I think picking up on Josh's point about the fact that no chatter was picked up, I mean, we've always got to be vigilant for changes in tactics and approach, and this possibly suggests that that is something that agencies always have to figure into their planning, and certainly would be the case here. So, and also just seeing that footage as well, Kieran, yesterday. I mean, I've had the opportunity of travelling through Boston a number of times and have friends there. Actually, someone who was located in the JFK library, and like many other Australians who've got friends and family in the US, thought instantly what's going on and are they okay? And then to see the footage itself was just something else. And Bostonians are very sturdy people. I think. You saw evidence of that yesterday when the explosions hit. They didn't scurry; they went straight to where people were injured and worked to help out. And seeing yesterday too, Kieran, if I can just make this point as well, that people can do this to other people is just beyond belief. I mean, we saw Boston, we saw Iraq yesterday as well, ahead of elections, where people had been killed by terror attacks in the streets there, in coordinated series of attacks. I mean, that people can do this to each other is just extraordinary and shameful.
And that young 8-year-old boy that had hugged his father after completing the marathon, who has lost his life, is just devastating.
No, totally.
But on the implications for Australian sports and our events here, Ed Husic, will we have to relook at the way we treat things like City to Surf and marathons and so on? Or is that letting the terrorists win?
I'd sort of echo the words of Premier O'Farrell here in New South Wales that we can't allow that to happen. We have major events that bring the community together, and we need to ensure that those events continue to play that very important role. But at the same time too, it just does remind of us of the need of constant vigilance and being able to obviously change according to tactics or preempt what tactics might be changing, and to be able to ensure that that safety in our way of life continues the way it is without us losing a sense of who we are.
Well, that was the point, Josh Frydenberg, that Barry O'Farrell made yesterday, that you don't want to change the character of things like the City to Surf or the Boston Marathon, that in some ways that lets the terrorists win. But then you've also got the issue that you spoke of before, that the reality of the modern world is that these things can happen, and that you need to be vigilant. So it is a balancing act, isn't it, between the freedom on the one hand, but also having that security awareness on the other.
Absolutely, and we shouldn't kid ourselves. We are a target here in Australia. I mean, you know, you only have to look at what's been said by the head of ASIO publicly in terms of the attacks on that were planned on the Holsworthy barracks in Australia, on Lucas Heights, and other targets in Australia. And after our involvement in East Timor, Bin Laden did a video, saying that Australia was a legitimate enemy. So, let's not kid ourselves. We are a target, but at the same time, I think Ed's right and Barry O'Farrell's right. We can't let the terrorists win. We've got to go about our normal day-to-day lives, and we shouldn't hold back from holding any public event, let alone a community sporting event. But we just need to be cautious, and we just need good coordination. That's what prudence requires.
All right, gents, let's take a quick break. When we return, we'll talk a bit about the domestic political debate in just a moment. Stay with us on AIM Agenda. This is AIM Agenda. Thanks for your company. With me now, Ed Husic and Josh Frydenberg. Josh Frydenberg, I want to ask you about the schools funding debate. There is a sense, despite the criticism from the coalition premiers, that at least Victoria and New South Wales will eventually sign on. Probably not this week at the COAG talks on Friday, but eventually. It's pretty hard to knock back $4 and $5 billion respectively.
Well, let's see what actually happens at COAG before we reach a conclusion as to which states are going to jump on board. But, let me just say at the outset, Kieran, I agree with Thomas Jefferson when he said education is the first defence of the nation. And I do believe we need to get better outcomes in education, because it's just not good enough that in Australia an average 15-year-old maths student is about 2 to 3 years behind his Shanghai counterpart. But what the government's proposed here is, is just not more money for education. They're proposing $9.4 billion of new money, but they've cut $11 billion out of teacher training, out of skills and universities, out of computers and schools and so forth. So, they're giving with one hand and then they're taking with the other. And when it comes to the states who've been asked to do a bit of the heavy lifting on this, the only state that's actually got a budget surplus is Western Australia, and that state has said that they're not coming on board. And what we don't want to do from the coalition's perspective is we don't want to support a whole lot of different funding models for different states. We've had uniform funding for education. We've got to continue with that, and we don't think that the government's proposals are taking us down the right path.
Whether you agree with the merits or not of the funding model itself, the politics of it suggest that you could have a dog's breakfast. That's the reality, isn't it, this election year, that you probably won't get all the states on board. And how is it viable then to have 2 or 3 hold out? It's not workable, is it?
Well, I don't think it's the first time that you go into a COAG process where people will be stating things that might be at opposite ends of each other, and then they find a way through. It's the beauty of our federalism, is that we have to make the federal and state governments work together effectively for the benefit of the nation, and I would wait and see for that process. But ultimately, what these reforms are about is that at the moment we have 1 in 12 students that aren't meeting national minimum standards on reading and writing and numeracy, and in some cases, in less advantaged areas, kids could be, 3 years behind others. And certainly we need, we've got a case where good schools are doing well, but we need schools that we think that could do better to do better, and we need to ensure that we provide greater support. And I see that out in my area, regardless of if you're a government or non-government school. With the advantage or disadvantage of some, we need to ensure that the outcomes improve. And I want to be able to see, as a local representative, where education in Western Sydney means so much to families, that we do see better outcomes. And, I had a principal in my area who said, Mark Bernard, who runs the Bidwell campus of Chifley College, he said, it's not about the system, it's about the student. And he's absolutely right. Being able to see better outcomes through the type of things that we're trying to do, Kieran, is absolutely critical, regardless of if you go to a government or non-government school. And $14.5 billion for education in this nation is such a worthwhile investment in our future.
Okay. All right, gentlemen, we have had a very heavy discussion this morning, and I do want to finish on a lighter note, if we can, this morning, this Wednesday. I know that you're very passionate about the Western Sydney Wanderers, Ed Husic. You'll be heading to the final this weekend, I guess.
I know who I sing for, and I sing for Wanderers. And I just think that it is a tremendous... I've got to say, like, for a team that's just come from, in its first year, to be, awarded and win the Premier's Plate, and then go out and be able to go into a grand final in its first year is sensational. But what it's done for our region is just brilliant, and the supporters in particular, have been. It has really brought the whole region together. It's just exciting to watch.
And I know it is a couple of days old now, Josh Frydenberg, but Adam Scott. Well, I know you were sending. We were exchanging messages on the morning of it. It was a remarkable result, wasn't it?
Well, you're too humble to say, Kieran, that you tweeted the night before that Adam Scott would win. So well done to you. Amazing. Personal effort by him, putting those long putts on the 17th and the 18th, or 18th, sorry, and the first hole, and the second hole of the playoff were incredible. But it's great for Australian sport, and I thought he was so humble in the press conference afterwards, and paying tribute to Greg Norman, another great Australian sportsman. And we've had a pretty good few years with Cadel Evans winning the Tour de France, and now Adam Scott winning the Masters, and let's hope it continues with the London Marathon even.
I just think it's impressive. Nice. I just think it's impressive. We don't need Tom Waterhouse. We've got Kieran Gilbert. He's making the calls.
Thanks, gents. Appreciate it. That's all for our agenda. The news is next. Thank you for your company.